I am Bobby Wendt.
And I am Aiden Delfava.
And we are here interviewing Michael Schmitt on May 13th of 2026 in West Bend, Wisconsin. All right, good. Okay, Mike, how are you today?
Fine. How are you?
Good. Let's start early. When were you born and where were you born?
January 47 in Milwaukee.
And what are some of your earliest memories when you were growing up?
The neighborhoods I lived in, the kids I grew up with, some of the things we did that were not too smart, but also we had a lot of fun. And the neighborhoods we grew up in, a lot of them had what they would now call a mom and pop store. And you could get literally anything there, except maybe liquor. They sold beer and groceries and things like that. A lot of the people in the neighborhoods had credit at those stores, then they'd pay them off at some point in time. I have no idea how they took care of that, but most of the neighborhoods had those. And in fact, there was one near where I went to grade school at Mothergood Council that was called Ma's. And Ma's store had mostly penny candy, and then they sold other things. But that was the neighborhood store for that neighborhood. And the one near us was actually on 76 and Our Avenue, and it was called Vollmer's, V-O-L-L-M-E-R. And that's where we didn't spend a lot of time there, but if you needed something quick or your mom needed something, you just run there and take care of it and head back home. Other than that, in the neighborhoods, we played at each other's homes. In the wintertime, as I was talking to you the other day, we used to play what I'll call war games in the basement at his house. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, we were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. You know, that was a very big thing then to do that, because not most of the fathers, but a lot of the fathers that were in the neighborhood that had kids my age were World War II veterans. And some of that came from that. Plus, there were a lot of war movies. And on TV, there were some shows that had their theme as war, which is unfortunate, but that's the way things were at that period of time.
Yeah, you were talking about before that you would play like a kind of a war game with the kids in your neighborhood. Was that kind of a common thing? Did you know everyone on the block that was around you?
Oh yeah, we definitely knew everyone on the block, and then for several blocks beyond that. And in fact, around Christmas time, usually in the afternoon of Christmas Day, we would call each other, and we wanted to see what each other received as gifts for Christmas, which was kind of cool. We never got the same things, never, because back then, as you do now, in a lot of cases, you receive gifts of things that you need, okay, because there wasn't a lot of money to go around. So your parents were very, very particular about what they bought for you. Usually it was clothing, okay. I had an older brother, and you guys, I'm sure, have heard of people passing down their clothing from one generation to the next. Well, that certainly happened in our family until we had a girl. But I would take my older brother's clothing that didn't fit him anymore, and I would use it for a number of years, and then my younger brother would. It was usually the clothes that you wore to school. We didn't have uniforms at all. You just wore what you had. And that's the way that worked. And as I said, until we had a girl in the family. Didn't work too well.
So you had a brother and a sister. What was life like growing up at home?
I had two brothers.
Two brothers.
Two brothers. I had an older brother. He passed away oh boy, almost 30 years ago. He had a lot of heart problems, so it was a difficult life for him as he got older. And then myself was the second child. My other brother was 6 years younger than I am, and then my sister is 8 years younger than I am. So when I was going to high school at Francis Jordan, my sister was going to Mother Good Counsel, which was across the street. So we'd see each other almost every day.
So what was it like growing up? What did your parents do?
My father was a carpenter. He worked for a number of different companies, and for that period of time, for a good at least 10 years, and then extended beyond that into the 60s, they built thousands and thousands of homes. I mean, I don't mean him personally, but the amount of homes that were built in that period was just huge. So he'd be working all over the city and in the suburbs, building homes. When he first started, he was what they called a roughing carpenter. They'd put up the structure, all the 2x4s, the walls and everything. And then as he got older, he got into finishing work, installing doors and doing all the woodwork and those types of things. And my mom was a typical housewife. She stayed home all the time until the kids got older, and then she had a part-time job. But she was home all the time. She baked bread, fresh for us. We'd kind of have that as a snack when we got home from school. So,
yeah. You were talking about going to Mother of Good Counsel. What kind of role did that have in your household? That's a faith-based school, so what did that kind of...
It had a very big role. My dad was an usher every Sunday at the church. My mom, with 4 kids, she didn't really volunteer until they had what they called their holiday fair right before Christmas, maybe 3 weeks. And that was a big affair for it was a fundraiser basically for the parish. The parish was huge. There were other parishes that branched off from it. Some examples would be Our Lady of Sorrows, which is on 64th, just north of Capitol Drive, St. Margaret Mary on 92nd Capitol, and St. Pius on 76th Street, between North and Center Street. Those are all parishes that were kind of children of Mother Good Counsel. Mother Good Counsel was started in the 20s. And it was just a small schoolhouse and a church, and that was the same building. Excuse me.
And did you kind of see that as a common thing for many of the households around you? A lot of your friends grew up in a faith-based?
Yeah, a lot of them had faith-based homes, but most of them in our neighborhood went to the public schools. I don't know the reason why, but that was their choice. Our family chose for us to go to a Catholic faith-based school and church, and a lot of others did too. That's obviously how I met a lot of the people that were my friends in grade school and high school. The high school was right across the street from the grade school. So it was kind of a natural move to go from the grade school to the high school.
So it was a pretty easy transition for you moving from grade
school? But
I
actually went to Marshall High School for 2 years, 61, 62, and 62 to 63. And then after my sophomore year, my folks moved me to Francis Jordan. And that's where I graduated from. I went there for 2 years. And that was mostly priests and brothers taught there, and in our grade school at Mother Good Counsel, it was nuns. And we had a few, what we call lay teachers, and we had a few lay teachers in the high school, but it was predominantly priests, brothers, and nuns that we had for teachers. And they all belonged to the same order. It was called the Salvatorians, which they use SDS as their 3-letter acronym.
So you were at 2 different high schools. What was the big difference between the 2? I know you were saying one was brothers and priests. Was that an all-boys school?
Yes. Yeah, it was an all-boys school. So we have that in common. along with your father. So at the public high school at Marshall, I felt a little bit like it was a factory. It was, you guys probably have never seen the building, but it was 3 blocks long, 2 stories high, and 2 blocks wide. I mean, it didn't fill the entire space with building, but it was just huge. And it was like a factory. I mean, there were so many kids in there. It was unbelievable. But you had to, again, remember the period of time that was open. It was open in 1961, and there were just lots and lots of kids, period. One thing I did that I forgot to tell you the other day was before the school opened, another guy in our neighborhood, one of my friends, found out that they're going to have a huge swimming pool in this high school. So we thought we'd go over and check it out. And the pool was done, but it was still under construction around the perimeter of it on the outside walls. So we went over there and took a swim. You could actually get in the building without a lot of difficulty as compared to nowadays. Nowadays, you don't get in. But that was one thing I did that I probably shouldn't have done, but I did.
What were some of your favorite subjects in grade school, high school?
In grade school? Well, one of the ones I was really good at is spelling. So if I had a spelling bee or something in the classroom, I'd always end up in the top 3 or so, because I just had that ability to spell words or maybe go from memory. I don't know. Math was okay. It wasn't one of my favorite subjects because I wasn't that great in it. Some of the other ones I enjoyed were art. We had art class. And of course we had what they call religion. They didn't call it theology, they called it religion. And you saw my report card the other day and it says religion. So those are some of my favorite classes. And the other one, of course, was recess.
What did you do outside of school when you were younger?
Once I was of the age where I could handle or take on a paper route, I had a paper route. In fact, I had several different ones. My older brother also had a paper route, and my younger brother. Later on, well, my older brother was first, and I was second, and my younger brother was third to take a paper route on. I also went and got jobs. Most of them early were on my paper route. One of them was at a Mott's paint store on a kind of a business area on Burleigh Street. The other one was at a place called the Gale's Dairy Store. And at the paint store, I simply stocked shelves. And at the dairy store, I worked, they had chicken roasters, and they'd also do fish fries. And they'd sell them in a bucket just like they do nowadays. And I was the guy who would be in the cooler with the milk, and I had to put the breading on the chicken and the fish. That was one of my jobs. And the other job was taking care of customers, because they had a drive-through back then, which most of the stores in the restaurant business have now, but a lot of other stores don't. And one of the things that you guys might see in a few grocery stores now is gallons of milk in a glass jug, okay? Which obviously the glass is heavy, and then you add 8 pounds of milk into it. So I used to take them and put them in people's car. I didn't handle any money. Didn't want to.
But you made money doing that. What?
Yeah, I think I was paid like maybe, oh boy, maybe 35, 40 cents an hour. But you have to remember, I was a minor and I had to get a work permit to do that job. And the pay back then was not much at all, obviously, but with 35 cents you could buy quite a bit, which you can't buy now.
What would you buy with the money that you would earn working?
Penny candy. Usually. There was other things. You could buy a Coke for a dime or a nickel. And there was a drugstore on my paper route, and I'd stop there once in a while at their soda counter or their, whatever you want to call it. It's a counter with stools, and then they had a Coke machine and some other drinks. And I'd usually stop and just get a Coke. It was, I think, a nickel, maybe 10 cents.
So you grew up in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah, there's one other thing I did. It's not really a job, but as we grew older and stronger, when we'd have a snowstorm, I told you this about the other day, we'd wait for the snow to kind of slow down, and we go around our neighborhood and some other neighborhoods, walk up to the door at a home where the sidewalks hadn't been cleaned, and ask them if they want them cleaned. And most of the time, they would say no, but when they did say yes, they'd say, well, how much do you want? So you'd tell them $2, $3, whatever it was. And then after we collected enough money in our minds, we would go down to Mamma Mia's Pizza and spend all of our cash. So that wasn't all we did with it, but that was kind of a highlight after you got snow shoveling done.
So you grew up in the Milwaukee area. What was that like as a child? Was it a lot different than it is as you see it now?
Yes, definitely. Where I grew up in 3 different neighborhoods. When I was born, I lived on Girard Avenue, which was a roughly 65th and Appleton Avenue, south of Holy Cross Cemetery. And then we moved from there to 29th and Valete, which was a very crowded neighborhood. The houses were close together. We rented a duplex there, the lower part of it. And there were trains that went through our not through the neighborhood, but near it. So that was a lot of noise. And we also had streetcars, which were on rails, and those were a lot of noise. And then we moved in 1951 to the home on 77th and Lisbon Avenue, which my dad built. And I lived there until I went into the Air Force in 1966. So, and my experiences around there, yes, the neighborhoods have changed. Not for the good, but mostly for the bad. I mean, I've seen my house that I grew up in as a child on the news at least once, where people were firing guns at each other. And that's too bad, but that's the way things are right now until it changes again.
Let's go into, you said you lived in that house until you went into the Air Force.
Yes.
So when did that start? What drew you to enlist?
Okay, as soon as I graduated from high school, I went and talked to a recruiter. The reason I did that was at the time there was a draft. And if you got drafted, the likelihood was very high that you would be drafted into the Army and you'd be sent to Vietnam. Okay, and I really didn't want to do that. I didn't really feel I obviously wouldn't like doing that. So what I did was the recruiters were all in one office, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard. So I went and talked to the Air Force, which my older brother was already in, and they signed me up to a program that was called an early enlistment. And what that did was you committed to go into the Air Force so they couldn't draft you, okay, because you already committed to go into one of the service branches in the very near future. So I actually went into the Air Force as active duty in May of 1966, okay? And I did my basic training in Amarillo, Texas, and my basic training was only 4 weeks. Normally it's 6 to 8 weeks. Mine was 4, because they needed people to fill open slots they had around. And then after that, I was on leave. I went home, and my orders were to go to a place called Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, which is the headquarters for the Strategic Air Command. Strategic Air Command, at that time, was they controlled all the bombers and all the land-based missiles around the world, because we had them in Turkey, we had them in a lot of places, probably a lot of places I didn't even know about. But that command is now called another name, and I forgot what their name is. I think it's called a Strategic Command right now. And now they actually control all the missiles, even on submarines, not just the land-based or aircraft. And that was a really good place for me to go so far as being in the Air Force. A little over a year later, in September of '67, I got married to Bonnie. And she moved out there to be with me, and she worked at Creighton University in the medical school as a secretary to the business manager, which was a really, really nice job to have, because he was a retired Army guy, and whenever Marquette would play Creighton in Omaha, we got tickets to go watch. And I worked for a really, really great group of people at SAC, at Strategic Air Command. And we used to visit them when we were out in that part of the country. So that was good.
So what was your role in the Strategic Air Command?
I worked in communications, not in the area where you use electronics or anything to communicate. I worked in the area that would develop contracts with phone companies, because all of our, we had mostly land-based cable going for the command and control for the missiles and bombers. Okay, and AT&T was a big company that we used. When it came right to at the bases where the missiles or bombers were, we had to work with the local phone company. So what I did was, I didn't administer any contracts or anything like that, but I would be the guy who would have to keep track of all of our communications with them, which most of it was done by message, which meant that I got to use my typing skills, which I haven't forgotten. So, and I worked in an office, 8 to 5 or whatever it was, and the headquarters was big. It was 4 stories. Plus we had the underground command post, which was 4 stories down. And once in a while I'd have to go down there to get some things or go to a meeting or something like that. And I'll never forget the guards they had, both to get into the headquarters building and then to get into the underground. You had to have an ID tag. And on the back of it, it would have what areas that you have access to. And they would check that, and then they check it against a list they had to make sure you're the right guy. And they did have photos. And I also had a photo on my ID that I showed them. And the underground is where the command post was, is where they controlled all the missiles and everything. Excuse me. And that was basically a group of high-ranking officers, and always had a 4-star general there. In case something would happen, he'd be running the show. It was mostly peaceful times then, and Bonnie's parents and brother came to visit us one year, and there were actually tours of that command post. They don't do that anymore. You can't even get on the base now. And we took them on a tour of that. But the people are very nice. One time I had to go down to an office of a general down in the command post, and we had to wait for some other people to come because I always showed up early by a few minutes. And he has a case of Coke sitting next to his desk. Want Coke? Of course I do. So it was good. The only thing that ever happened was in early 1969. The North Koreans had not stolen, but took one of our ships, one of our spy ships called the Pueblo. Okay, and they took it to one of their ports in North Korea, and they held the crew there. I forget how many days it was. It was probably around 30 days. And I had to go in to the office and be there for the entire weekend when this took place. And that's the only time I've had to go in there other than the weekdays. Otherwise, that was the only time I had to do that. And we met some nice people as neighbors in Omaha. We rented a furnished apartment for $90 a month, but I had to cut the grass and shovel the snow.
Was Omaha different noticeably from Milwaukee?
The difference between Omaha and Milwaukee, I'll put it this way. In those days, Omaha was a huge packing plant. They had what they called the South Omaha cattle yards, or the beef yards they called them. The neighbor we met near our place that we rented there was what they called an on-the-hoof inspector. He would be out with the cattle and checking them to make sure that there's no visible disease or anything that he could see, so they couldn't be put into the process to be cut up and made into hamburger and steaks and all that good stuff. But they were basically a very agricultural-based economy out there. They had very few manufacturers. Today it's mostly service-oriented, a lot of insurance companies, and stock, big stock owning companies, that type of thing. But the stockyards are gone.
And then how long were you in the military? What led?
I was discharged a little bit early. I was supposed to be discharged in May of 1970, but they had a budget cut, and they actually discharged me early in March of 1970. The nice advantage that I had was the fact that I was married, and I had been in for over 4 years technically, because I actually enlisted in '65. So what they had to do was they had to pay for moving what furniture I had and what belongings I had back to Milwaukee. So that was one benefit I got out of it. Oh, and then they paid me so much a mile. Okay, back then, the mileage was calculated upon railroad miles. Okay, in other words, everybody was transported by train, which we weren't, but they would base it on the number of railroad miles you'd have to travel to get to your home. And they paid you so much per mile. So that's how they reimbursed you. That's gone now, obviously.
What did you start doing when you were discharged from the Air Force?
First thing I did was try to find a job, obviously, and what I did end up doing, because I couldn't find anything that quickly, I just took a job because we had rent to pay again. And what I did was went to work for a company called Pinkerton. And Pinkerton's an old, I'll call it a security company. They provided guards for a lot of businesses. They also used to handle cash. Some old westerns, you might see the name Pinkerton on maybe in a stagecoach, and they hauled money. They hauled cash, okay? And that's how Pinkerton started. And what I did was worked in a place called Boston Store in downtown Milwaukee, and I worked in the area where they had their furs, just to keep an eye on people. And that's what I did for like 10, 12 hours a day, just standing around, walking around. And that got old pretty quick. My back would get sore and so on. After that, I went to work for a company called Mueller Climatrol, which was located on 20th in Oklahoma. It's gone now. And they made residential heating, air conditioning, and they also made commercial heating and air conditioning. And I worked in their order office where the orders came in from their sales force in the field. And I would have to convert the orders into what models they get and what features they get or don't get. And I worked there for maybe from May till February the next year. So not even a year. And from there I went to Harley Davidson. And there I was what they called a scheduler. And I would schedule a certain group of parts to be manufactured to support building motorcycles. And back then, all the motorcycles were built at 37th and Juneau Avenue. Some on the 4th floor, some on the 3rd floor, and then the engines were built there, the transmissions, and we also had Capitol Drive back then, which is now a big U-Haul center, and that's where most of the actual manufacturing took place, and the assembly took place at Juneau Avenue. And I was there until 2005 when I retired.
I guess after you were discharged from the Air Force, did you see like a lot of people entering the workforce that were being discharged from other lines of the force, or were they still in Vietnam?
Not that I'm acutely aware of, no.
Did you have any friends that were in Vietnam that when you got back?
My brother-in-law was, and Bonnie's cousin was. Bonnie's brother was in the Army. He actually went over there twice. He was what they called a electronics specialist, and what he worked on were the electronics, what they called miniguns, which were on helicopters. And the miniguns were basically, I believe, like a .22 caliber, small shells, but the effectiveness was the fact that you could blurt out like 200 or 300 per second, or per minute, excuse me, of the shells. It just sent them in bursts really fast. And her cousin, who was in the Air Force, was over there, and he was what they call an airframe specialist. So he was placed at one of the airfields, and they would repair and make sure that aircraft were ready to fly. They had to check any damage they might have had, things like that. And they both came back from Vietnam. So.
I guess let's talk a little more about your career at Harley Davidson. So you started as a scheduler. Where did that lead you?
That led me into the purchasing area about 1984. The biggest reason that happened was they moved our office from the Juneau Avenue headquarters out to the Capitol Drive plant. The biggest reason they did that was the fact that motorcycle assembly was moved from Juneau Avenue to York, Pennsylvania. Because we were a multiple-story building, we had to run everything up and down elevators. And in York, they had a one-story huge building they could put it in. And then I went into purchasing because the purchasing department also came out to the Capitol Drive plant. Because we weren't really buying anything for the motorcycle anymore. Now we're buying raw materials and components for engines and transmissions that were made at Capitol Drive. And one of the things that I should also interject is when I was at Juneau Avenue, one of the jobs I was given, and I don't remember the year it was, probably 74, 75, somewhere in there, with another gentleman, was we had to start moving components of the motorcycle to the York plant. So we'd be going out to the assembly lines, I think twice a week, and pick components that they wanted out there by their manufacturing engineers and put it into shipping containers and then ship it out to Pennsylvania. We didn't do the shipping, of course, but there was a guy that had to inspect everything. His name is Bill Bedini, okay, and I still am in touch with him. We had lunch about a year ago. He was also in Vietnam. He was injured twice. He was shot in his back and his leg, twice. So, and he lives not too far from here, and he and I get together for a lunch or something once in a while and just talk things over. So I've known him for over 50 years. And he was quite a guy, really smart guy. He was an inspector, and his inspection of physically looking at things and measuring them to make sure they met specs evolved into him running CMM machines. You guys familiar with those? Mm-hmm. Okay. And programming them, that type of thing. Then he was a layout inspector for parts after that. So he had a lot more smarts than I did around that stuff. And then eventually, from purchasing at Capitol Drive, I went down back to Juneau Avenue, where Bonnie worked, in Hogg. And I was in the parts and accessories area, which Short description is anything that fits onto the motorcycle. It could be ornamental, it could be a product that enhanced the performance, it could be for safety if you wanted to enhance it, but that's what was handled by the parts and accessories area. Parts being the parts to replace worn out ones, and accessories being things you can hang on them or put on them. And then from there, in 1995, I went into corporate purchasing. And then I worked in that area, having all different kinds of responsibilities. One of them included organizing meetings of suppliers, of our major suppliers, so our executives could share with them what our plans were into the future. And of course, that was confidential information because we talked 2-3 years out, and we're planning to build, let's say, 300,000 motorcycles, and right now we're building 200,000. So you guys, you suppliers, are going to have to up the ante on getting new machines or more machines and more people. And we want you to be aware of that ahead of time rather than just sending you an order. So I had to organize those. We usually had one once a year in one place and bring in the major suppliers. The other thing I did was having to do with suppliers. We didn't really know a lot about our suppliers. The individual buyers did, but the company didn't. We didn't have records of it. Who really owns you? Who are they? Where are they? Are you a stock company? Are you privately owned? And I was given the responsibility to find out all those pieces of information. And some of the companies were very reluctant to give that to you. You know, what do you want that for? And the only reason we wanted it is we wanted to know who our supply base was, and in case there's any issues that come up, we know who to go to. Because talking to the everyday guy, it may not solve it. You may have to go to their executive level. The other thing that happened as part of that was we would assign president from our company and in some cases VPs, because we have more VPs than a president, and they would handle the executive level conversation, if you would, with the executives of that company or the ownership of that company. And that worked out very well to our surprise too. The other thing I did was once every year we would have a similar meeting with our suppliers in Japan. And that might sound a little funky to you that we had suppliers in Japan back in the 80s. The reason we did was the fact that the Japanese made really, really good motorcycles, okay? We didn't want to get bought by a Japanese company, which was talked about at one point in time. But what we wanted was to learn from them how we could improve our product. So the initial thing that we bought from them were clutches. And I told you a story about my friend. But initially we bought clutches from them, which greatly improved the reliability and the performance of our motorcycle. And eventually we ended up buying shock absorbers from them and a shock absorber on the front of the motorcycles. And all motorcycles, they have these long forks in the front. They're actually shock absorbers, but they're big. So that we bought from them, and a lot of other things, carburetors, because they could do a better job. And quite frankly, in this country, people would look at our volumes every year and say, we really don't want a customer that's that small. But the Japanese didn't care. So.
I guess we talked a lot about your career. What was your life like outside of work after you were discharged from the military? Do you have kids?
Yeah, we had 2 kids, Heidi in '73 and Joe in '74. And that was the end of that. We had one of each kind. And that was that. And then they grew up in Milwaukee, and while we lived in Menominee Falls, when they went to grade school, they went to St. Mary's, another parish-based school in Menominee Falls. And then they both went to Menominee Falls High School. And Heidi was on the track team. At one time, she did the shot put. Did she ever tell you that? And she was also on their softball team. And she did cheerleading, of course, and a few other things. Joe he played basketball in grade school at St. Mary's, but when he went to high school, he started hanging around with some different guys, and he ended up going on the soccer team and ended up being an excellent soccer player. He lettered every year. One thing that happened that was really a surprise was he was picked as the homecoming king one year off the soccer team, not the football. You can talk to him about that. But yeah, they finished high school in 4 years, no problems with it. Did all the normal high school stuff. And then Heidi went off to Winona State in Minnesota, and Joe went to MATC campus up in Mequon. Studied some stuff. He didn't really care to go to college, but he did for a while, and then now he's an iron worker, making really good money. So, okay.
I guess when you were growing up, it was a lot different than when your kids were growing up. I mean, you didn't go to college. How did you kind of feel about the change between more strive for education and?
Well, I did a little bit of, I won't call it college, but when I was in the Air Force, because they didn't send me to any training school, I went to classes on the base that were done by University of Oklahoma, okay? And there were some others that were done locally by University of Nebraska that I had to attend. They just gave you grades, you didn't get any credit for it, okay? And then while I was working at Harley Davidson, to get ahead and get promoted, you needed to go to some schools and gain some knowledge about supervising people and working with people that work for you, which was, I won't call it enlightening, but it was very good training because they do it in a practical way. It wasn't just books. They put you through exercises and things with people that came in that weren't classmates, so that worked out well. And I did most of that out at Waukesha Technical College.
And earlier you mentioned you retired from Harley in 2005. Mm-hmm. What does life look like since then for you?
Great. Actually, before I retired, I had a job lined up for myself as a consultant after I retired, because I was 58 years old and I really didn't want to stop working. So I got a job as a consultant for an organization called WMEP. It's not a radio station. It stood for the Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And what we would do is we would help small manufacturers, and small manufacturer in their terms was any company that employed less than 500 people. And we would help them improve how they handle orders when they come in from a customer. How many days does it take from when you receive the order until you get paid? And we'd help them improve it. Most of the time, the improvement was 50%. So if they got paid in 60 days after the order came in, they would now be down around 30, which, as you're going to find out, made a big difference for them for cash flow. So a lot of them followed the process after we had left. And we didn't tell them how to do it. We went to the people in their offices and their shops who actually did the work to find out where their bottlenecks were. And then they fixed it.
What else outside of that? What kind of hobbies have you picked up? What do you do?
Well, I rode motorcycle a lot. Fortunately, when I was at Harley, I got to do a lot of trips working for them. Most of the time I was to go to rallies, sometimes with Bonnie, sometimes by myself, and that would be all over the country. One year I had to ride from here to California and back for a rally going on out there, which I did by myself, and it was kind of an adventure because you're riding by yourself, not with a group. It's safer to be in a group, obviously, but this time I went by myself. And other things I did while I was working there, I'm sorry for backing up a little bit, was I had to go work with senators and congressmen on legislation for budgets. And that budget was the budget that had to do with funding WMAP organizations. So.
What were some of those trips? Any memorable ones?
One year, Bonnie and I had to go to Nevada, not to Las Vegas, to Reno, Nevada. And we did a hog rally there for about a week. And then we took 2 weeks vacation after that. So we went to the Grand Canyon. And I rode through the painted desert on a motorcycle. And as we were riding we went to the north rim of the Grand Canyon, not the south, because the north rim is prettier and it's not commercialized. And one of the things that happened to us on the way there was, if you can picture this, the Grand Canyon, the tops of all the hills, or what was the surface of the soil, were flat, okay? On the north rim, it's all pine trees. It was like going up north. It was crazy. But we stopped for lunch at a little restaurant and gas station before we went to the north rim, which is another 40 miles south of us. And a rainstorm came through, so the guy at the gas station said, just put it inside. He said, if I need you to move it, I'll come over and get you. So we had lunch, and a rainstorm came through during lunch. And then we were leaving, and we put all of our helmets and everything back on, and we went down the road maybe 2 miles. It starts hailing, okay? And then we had lightning and thunder at the same time. Usually it's lightning and then you hear the noise. This was together. So what I did, because of all the hail on the road, we got behind a food delivery truck and just followed his tire tracks through the hail to make it a little safer, but you still had questions about, we got all this lightning going on. Fortunately, no one was hit by any lightning because there were some guys way ahead of us, and those guys didn't have helmets on, so probably had a headache. But we got there and it was worth the ride.
I know we talked a bit about these rallies that you would go to, and you kind of had a hobby for the biking. Between working at Harley and kind of being a part of the culture yourself, what did you see as, like, would you tie yourself in with that group of Harley riders?
Yeah, we belong to a local chapter of HOG, which is a Harley owners group. We belonged to the chapter in West Bend at one time, and then we also belonged to the one in Hartford when there was a dealership there, which has since closed. It's now a meat market. And that's how we got tied into that. But one of the issues we had was they would find out that we both worked at Harley. And they found out that Bonnie worked at HOG. So they would ask for favors all the time. So at one of the meetings, we both got up and said, it's great being with you guys, but please don't ask us to do you any favors. We're not in those areas. We don't do that. You know, if you have an issue with them, we'll provide you a name to talk to, but we're not going to get involved in it. So they respected that. So that worked out.
And then we talked the other day, after you retired, you moved out to Erin.
Actually, we did that in, I think, 1993 when I was working at Harley.
What was that change? That's a big countryside instead of the city environment that you've always been around.
Oh yeah, big time change. Heidi and Joe both wondered, well, your mom was going to school already, and it was kind of a surprise to both of them that we went and got a big house after living in a ranch house for a while. But we just wanted to move, and we wanted to move where we had some room, and we had a lot of room there, as you well know. And we lived on a little lake, a man-made lake.
I guess what other kind of stories do you have for us? Interesting.
Motorcycle? I got one other one. One year we did a rally called Rolling the Coast, which meant we rode our bike down to Georgia. Forgot the name of the town. It's a famous town. It's on the Savannah River. What's Savannah, Georgia? On the Savannah River. And then we had a ride up along the Atlantic coast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, those places. And there was a hurricane, because it was in late summer, and there was a hurricane. And unfortunately, the hurricane was named Bonnie. So we rode up the coast, and we were staying in North Carolina, and the hurricane came through overnight. So in the hotel we were at, we had to stay in a room that's on the side that didn't get the wind, because the rooms that got the wind on the opposite side had a lot of water in them, because it would just blow under the doors and the windows and everything. And we got up the next morning and everything was clear, because we were in the eye of the storm now. But the wind was horrible. So we got on the motorcycle and we're going north along this road that's twisty and turny all the way along the coast. And I was actually riding the motorcycle at a steep angle like this into the wind so I could stay upright. So that was an experience with two people on it. My arms were sore, but everybody was safe.
Also, when we talked the other day, you talked about some trips to DC.
Yeah, that's the ones I did when I worked at Harley, and it was for funding of the manufacturers extension partnerships around. There's one in every state, okay? Just a little background on that. The reason it was called that is it was fashioned after the agricultural EPs, they would help farmers, especially after the great dust storms out in the plains, to get back into business. And they helped the farmers through all that. So it was designed after that, but for small manufacturing. And it worked very well. They're still doing their thing. So is the extension service for the agriculture department. So that's what that was. And I had to meet with senators. I had to meet with congressmen to let them know that Harley was behind the funding. The money was not for Harley Davidson. It was for their suppliers. We didn't need the money. Our corporation did not need it. But some of the suppliers are very small, and they don't have big budgets to spend on improving this and improving that, or buying new machinery, or changing processes. It all costs money, every bit of it. So that's what those visits were for. And we had other visits there too for HOG. Every year there's Memorial Day, there's a big rally held for motorcycles, and it's primarily ex-military that go there. So we get to go park at the Pentagon and have all the people come and register with us. And on both cases that we had gone there, we had personal tours of the White House, which was really cool. The press is gone, so there were members of the Secret Service that were there that were also HOG members. So that's how that tied together.
And then also, when we talked the other day, since we're kind of talking about the DC and you meeting with politicians, you talked about seeing JFK during his campaign?
Oh, when I was younger. I was 14 years old, 1961, and we went there with our family, and we stayed at my dad's sister's house They lived in Rockville, Maryland. And there was a parade with JFK, and I believe it was the Prime Minister of Pakistan was visiting, and there was a parade for him. So I got to see him. I never met him, but I got to see him. So that was kind of cool.
And I guess during his assassination, did you see any effects around the area, in the Milwaukee area?
Yeah. The first effect that happened was most people headed to church to pray because they thought bad things were going to happen. But with the system we have for not replacing, but to take over the office in this country, it's very clean and quick. So Johnson was inaugurated on the Air Force plane within a couple hours after Kennedy was killed. So that worked out well, but that happened. The other thing that happened, there was someone else with the name John that was killed, or I shouldn't say killed, that died that year. You guys probably don't know. Probably you may have heard it in one of your classes for theology. Pope John the 23rd also died that year. So that was a big thing in our school, obviously, along with Kennedy.
And then I guess just looking back over your life, what are some of the things that you're most proud of?
Having never been laid off by any place, anywhere. That was always something I was very proud of, primarily because my father being a carpenter, when the housing booms would slow down, he'd get laid off. So he'd have to go find work somewhere doing stuff. And usually he would lean on people wanting work done in their homes, but not having a contractor do it. So he did a lot of that. And then later on, he actually started a business with my younger brother, and they would do home repairs. They'd do roofs, remodeling, all kinds of things, because there just wasn't much work to be done in homes anymore. And he was getting older, and it's really difficult to find work as you get older. People just, I guess, have the mental attitude that you can't do much when you're 60, but that's not the case. It's not true.
You've seen the world go through a lot of changes. What is something that some sort of advice that you would give to kind of get through it all?
Keep an open mind and get both sides of the story, even if you don't want to, so you understand someone else's point of view, basically. And then you can decide, you know what your point of view is, but now you know theirs also. So try to get that. And there was a little piece of paper I gave you the other day, some things that I learned. The first one I put on there was begin, the rest is easy. I learned that at Harley. You just start doing it and things kind of all fall in place for you because you took the lead to do something. The other two I don't remember verbatim, but they were both from people in England. One of them had to do with making decisions. And the first word in it, I believe, is indecision, is the worst. Make a decision even if it's the wrong decision, because you learn pretty quick it was the wrong one, and you change it. So, and I forgot the third one.
I've got it at home.
Oh, okay.
I guess that's all we have for you. Do you have anything else you want to share with us?
No, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I've never been asked to do anything like this, so it was very interesting to me to do it.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of the project, is not everybody has the opportunity to kind of get there
And
recorded.
again, you get different points of view, different experiences, and if somebody learns something from it, great, and if they don't, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.